Welcome to today's webinar. We're really fortunate to have a couple of really interesting speakers with us today to talk about automating a really basic part of our everyday part of business, which is reporting. And today we're joined by Phil Hall from Lendlease and Grace Murphy from the Data School. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is just welcome you to the technology. We're using a webinar format, and because of the number of people that have subscribed, we've got you on mute, so you won't be able to interact directly with the panel today. I'll be your medium and your conduit to ask the questions. On your screen, you'll have a Q&A panel, so if you would like to ask questions of the panel, please do that through the Q&A panel on your screen, and we'll pose the questions to our guests. We're going to take about 30 minutes today. We're going to run through some of the challenges that our panelists faced in dealing with the volumes of data that they presented at Lendlease. And we're going to talk quite a lot about the use of Alteryx, and we'd like to thank Alteryx for co-sponsoring this webinar today. So, over to you, Phil. How about a quick introduction for our audience today?
My name's Phil Hall. I'm the Senior Project Controls Manager at Lendlease. I've been with the business for about 12 years. I joined Lendlease as a project manager and then went into conversion, which is winning work, tendering. So managing that portfolio of $60 billion worth of bids per annum really led me into that analytics space and into reporting and the best practice visualization of that reporting. And so that brings me to the point now where I've really focused my career into leading the analytics team. Well,
it sounds like you're going to have a lot of challenges with lots and lots of data. So we'll come back and talk quite a bit about that through the morning. Grace, over to you. Introduce yourself to our audience today.
Hi, I'm Grace. I joined the Data School in April last year. I have a background in biology, so I like analytics. But I started to want to move more into the data scene rather than doing biology experiments. I saw the application process for the Data School, and I just thought that was a really good opportunity to get into data because I didn't need strictly any data experience. I applied and I was lucky enough to get the job. I've been loving it ever since.
And look, Grace is a good example of why Lendlease extensively use the Data Schoolers. Once they graduate, we call them data specialists. We've got people who have gone through extensive training around analytics, around best practice visualizations, and they're able to come into our organisation generally on 6-month commissions, and they're able to really value add to the teams and give us the opportunity to grow the teams by the positive outcomes we have from their initiatives.
That sounds really interesting. We talk about teams, we talk about Lendlease. Phil, can you give us a really brief context of Lendlease? It's a really large organisation, so if you can focus on the area that you work with, the kind of people that you serve the data and analytics up to, and how they use that, and we'll then sort of get to the point of talking about why you needed to automate and change some of the processes.
Lendlease is Australia's largest property development and construction company. Generally, we have about 300 to 350 projects on the go globally, about $15 billion worth of revenue per annum. I work in the services part of the business, so it's a little less known because we don't have cranes across the top of our projects with the names up in lights, but Lendlease have a services division that handles the build of the 5G telecommunications network, the maintenance of tens of thousands of kilometres of roads across the country. We build roads, we build bridges, we build precincts. It's a very high performing culture, and we're looking through these initiatives to improve the culture around data.
Wonderful. How many people have you got in the services team that you address?
There's a couple of thousand direct employed staff in the services space, and we generally manage on average 10 times the amount of people in-house in subcontractors. So we'd have about 20,000 subcontractors that are building fibre networks and telecommunications towers and et cetera, et cetera.
Quite significant. So, and most of that would be project-oriented work?
It's very much project-based. Yeah, so the average project is 100 million, and we've got hundreds on the go at any time.
Okay, so hundreds, large complex projects, lots of moving parts, lots of people. That just means lots of data,
opportunity
right?
for data, lots of, it's all about the appropriate planning of time and cost.
Absolutely. So from that perspective then, where did you start this journey? So explain a little bit about how you were actually disseminating information and data to your constituents in the business before all this automation took place.
Well, look, it's been an iteration. In this current role where I've really dedicated on analytics, we started with deciding we wanted to spin up a team that were really focused on analytics and reporting. We started 3 years ago with a team of 2. We've now got 22. And I think that the data school has given us a real opportunity to grow that, right? Because we've been able to identify numerous initiatives that have a really positive benefit to the bottom line of the business, right? That can improve margin, that can streamline those processes. And, we've developed that culture of out there looking for opportunities, looking for where we can provide benefit, and really self-funding the growth of that team.
So you're looking for opportunities to automate? Is that what I'm hearing there? When you talk about streamlining, are you essentially talking about automation of processes, or is there a different
Yeah, look, that's essentially the bottom line, right? It's all about automation, right? It's all about that identification of information that is standard across the broadest range that we can find. Frankly, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, right, across this industry and many others, where we can find those opportunities. And it's a mindset that is really emphasised for the data schoolers as they're going through their training with the way that they're running client programs, right? They're running a week of work for a set organisation, and then they're developing those outcomes and they're presenting back to their stakeholders at the end of the week.
So an iterative process all the way through, right?
Yep, that iterative process, right? So they're laying the groundwork to always be on the lookout for where these opportunities are. All of those environments have a data footprint, right? So if we just look at a hard hat, right? These days, we've got AI that runs hard hats. We've got the procurement for those hard hats. We've got the vehicles running around with GPS systems, right, so that we can track them. They're all using applications on their phones, so we know who's where, when, from what organisation. We can align that with the planning of the project, right? So what skill set do we need on site, on which day? How does that interact with the program? All of that has a data footprint, right? Now, we still may have people, subcontractors, running around with plans in their hands, much to my disgust. But still, it's all reflected. They're building to the data, to the plans that we've laid out for them.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I think one of the things that we tend not to think about a lot is when you automate a data process, part of the downstream is the use, part of the upstream is actually the capture of the data, so improving those processes. And it sounds like you're already way over that with, as you said, GPS data and understanding where people are and how they're using it, and the applications to automate even the capture, right?
Yeah. Well, it's really a closed cycle, right? So, as day to day, we've got people entering data as to what they've completed, then that feeds into the next plan, that feeds into the next trade. Right, you've got to lay the concrete before you can put carpet on it, right? So it helps us do all of that timing, and then at the end of a project, there's an enormous amount of lessons learnt, right? So how can you bring that into the next project to make it more efficient and to make it more successful?
And let me bring Grace into the conversation here, because all that data needs somehow to be wrangled and somehow to be managed and corralled to make some sense of it. So share some of your experience with when you first started at Lendlease, what you found, how many data sources, how much data were you dealing with, what was the quality of the data, what were we dealing with here?
Well, I suppose a lot of the reporting I was doing was in telco, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. You have sort of one data source might be a third normal form database, very easy to sort of wrangle that data. Other times it's a whole bunch of Excels where the formats change constantly and they're user-entered data. So it just depends on the project or the report that you're making. It was a really good experience because of that variety. But yeah, it just depends. Lots of different sources, lots of different systems as well.
Talk to the quality of the data, like how much of that was really nice and neat and consistent and easy to use?
Well, when you get an Excel document that people say would report with, it's rarely in the format that is easy to work with. So you have to use Alteryx to get it into a nice prepared format, to pass out those blank rows and those nice colourful headers that they put. They've got different tables all in the one Excel. I think it's very common in a lot of workplaces that people will use Excel as a reporting tool. So trying to reverse engineer that and build, say, a dynamic report or automate a pipeline of data is a challenge, but it's very fun.
And that's why you joined the data school, right?
That's exactly why I joined the data school.
And so you're using Alteryx to do this.
Yes.
Would it be possible without Alteryx, do you think?
Database work, yes, you can use SQL. Have a very long query. Parsing Excels, also yes, but you would sort of probably move into sort of using programming languages and things like that. So not as high functioning techniques maybe, but.
So harder to implement, probably more expensive to maintain as well. So from Phil's perspective, once you develop something, if you then build it in some different language, it'd probably be more costly to build and more costly to maintain, right?
Yeah, and it would probably need its own complete infrastructure as well if you wanted to pipeline between things like that.
Okay, so help us understand a little bit about your day-to-day with Lendlease. How do you go about getting the data, analysing, talking to your stakeholders? Just give us a bit of a day in the life of how you work at Lendlease with Phil's team.
Well, I would probably log in the morning and there would be an email to build a report. I would probably contact the person the report was for. I would ask how they're going to use the report, because that's always really important. One of the things I actually learned at Lendlease is always ask how they're going to use the report, because that's going to make it a lot easier to build. I find out where they're getting their data from, and then I would have to try and work out a way to automate that so that the report can refresh daily without any input from a human. So yeah, that's generally the steps that are taken, but it does involve a lot of stakeholder engagement, which is also fun.
It sounds like you've got quite a wide range of internal users and stakeholders, or customers as we refer to them. How do you deal with the variety of data and the variety of work that you have to deal with?
You learn quickly. But yeah, I suppose you have to learn how a system works. You have to learn where that data comes from originally. You determine what erroneous data looks like, what good data looks like. You build in error checking into any workflow that you make. And yeah, it also involves going back to that stakeholder and showing them what you've built, getting their feedback and then iterating on it.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Alteryx, so tell us in more detail, how do you use Alteryx then to generate the reports and automate that process?
We used it a lot to we would have our database inputs or connect to Site Tracker or connect to Outlook even, or Navman with the fleet GPS data, whatever it is, we would connect to it. We get it into a nice format that's going to be easy to report on. We may even blend in multiple data sources. So a lot of the time there's disparate data sources and we need, say, logic from one data source to be able to draw a conclusion on data from another data source. We get it into the format that we want. I warehouse it somewhere in a database, and then we can build reports off that or give access to the people who need to use it.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges there is that just in our part of the business, we've got more than 300 different applications, right? Ranging from design tools to surveying tools to, like you say, navigation tools, right? So it's really the challenge for the data specialists is to get in, understand those systems and understand the application interfaces, understand how they can extract that data into that centralised repository.
So that's interesting. You talk about navigation tools. So we're talking about quite complex data types as well. So I'm guessing you're doing some spatial analysis or presenting spatial reporting as well. Is that something that you've been working with?
We do that in our team. I didn't personally do that, but the GIS suite is available, and so a lot of the work we do involves a lot of GPS.
So Phil, understanding the spatial dynamic, is that something that's added a new dimension to the...
I think that it's become more and more prevalent. Right? Particularly for the type of work we do in our services part of the business. I mentioned before, tens of thousands of kilometres of roads. Right? We're servicing clients right across Australia, right? And we're bidding one at the moment. There's 42,000 separate locations, right, with equipment and facilities that we need to maintain and enhance, right? And so, putting that information on, a geospatial platform, and then being able to run the calculations, right? A lot of those calculations we're pulling from 400 layers of data that we have in a GIS system. We're pulling it out, we're running Alteryx workflows on it, we're pushing the results back, right? So yeah, it's become more and more prevalent, and I see the future being location information applied to the majority of data that we'll use across our projects.
Okay, so geospatial, absolutely agree, Phil. I think that's going to be a key part of analytics moving forward. Temporal analytics, both not just location, but changes in time as people move across. But let's get down to something that you guys have actually worked with recently, and something a bit more practical. Can you talk to one of the projects that you use the data school for with Alteryx?
Sure. All right, and maybe it ties to the GIS because we've got 50 to 60 projects in our business unit that are running at any time, and some of them can be located right across the country, some of them in designated areas. All right, so we've recently worked putting together what we call the automated monthly project reporting. So every one of those projects needs to report. All right, so Lendlease being a listed company, we have quality assured processes. One of those processes is that every project, every month, needs to give us a detailed report to management that details a dozen fields, a dozen areas, including finance, commercial, HR, etc., etc.
So a standardised approach to the metrics that you guys use to keep a check on the health of the business, right?
So look, they're all doing that as standard practice, and they were very high calibre reports. What we've done is we've taken that standard required process and we have automated the financial reporting such that it appears in the report across half a dozen different visualizations of the finance information, across visualizations of their projects in delivery reporting, visualization of their health and safety statistics. Right? So we've essentially taken that out of the hands of the project managers, and we've run these automated scripts, right, that Grace and the data school team have put together. All right, and we pre-populate those reports with some of the fundamental information that's required, and that gives us a standardisation. All right, so maybe Grace can give us some detail on how she makes all that magic work in the background.
Go for it, Grace. Share the magic skills here.
Yep. So myself and 3 other data schoolers over a couple of months built sort of two stages of how this process works, and Alteryx is used in both stages. The first stage is getting that data from disparate sources and putting it in a format that it can be easily reported on. The second stage is downloading those visualizations from the Tableau server and inserting them into a Word document so that that can be automated, and then sending those reports out to the project managers.
And so they all have access to the documents on a regular basis? This is a monthly process that you run, so monthly REST reporting?
Every month they'll get an email, an automated email, with the report attached with some other information as well.
So they don't have to go looking for it. Once a month the reporting pack appears in their email, they click the link, they get the access to the documents, the Word documents that they need, and off they go.
Yeah, and they would fill it out in more detail and speak to the visualizations, and then send it or submit it to their operations manager.
And that provides a standardised approach across all of the services business unit in Lendlease, yeah?
Yeah, so even though the reports that we were getting were very high quality reports, when a senior manager looks across a suite of reports, they're getting information that is reported in a different way. Right? There's a different graph per project. There's different targets. There's different color schemes used. Right. So what we've done is use the skill set of our data specialists who have worked to develop the professional visualization skills, right? We've developed a standardized, agreed graphical representation, and we just push that in to start the process.
Wonderful. Now, I also understand that you've been able to insert images and go beyond just graphs and bar charts and line charts in the visualizations. How technical and what were the issues that you faced when you were trying to insert images into some of these Word documents and reports?
Well, actually, downloading the images from the server and inserting them wasn't that difficult. I suppose the technical side of it, or the tricky side of it, comes with error checking and then trying to correct those errors. So really there's a three-part process to the Word doc automation. We download the images from the Tableau server. The second step is inserting them. But the third step, which I think is the most important one, is that when we insert them, the Python script I use to insert them creates an error log. With the run command tool, I can read that error log back in, and then if there's any issues, I can iterate through that process again and re-download them and reinsert them for the projects where the files will maybe be corrupted. So that happens with inside an iterative macro in Alteryx, and that capability just means that the error checking and the resolution can sort of happen automatically as well.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a couple of things happening there. So you've got an automated approach to check for the quality of the data coming in, the quality of the images, and making sure that the resolution is fine. But you're also using Python to do some work there. So it looks like Alteryx can work with the external languages as well as its own stuff. So why Python for this particular routine?
Python, because Python has a package called Python docx where you can edit the XML of Word documents. So I'd have a Word template, and I can call a Python script that for a particular project will insert the images and other information, not always just images, but other information relevant to the report, and then save it as a Word document. So yeah, that's why I use Python, but because of the developer suite in Alteryx, it's really good at sort of integrating other processes and then reading back in information that those processes create. So they work well together.
So you can use the best tool for the job rather than trying to use a screwdriver to drive in a nail, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think Grace picked up on a very interesting point there, and that is the error checking, right? So that extra emphasis on ensuring the data quality, input, and throughout the process to the outputs that we provide to the teams, we've been able to put the error checking to an nth degree that individual projects would never have gone to. So
What does that mean?
it means that when we're okay, so rather than having people that may not necessarily be highly skilled in that field, drawing on data sources transforming that information into their own representations. They may not have built the error checking processes to the degree that we have.
Okay, so you're improving the quality of the data that's being captured a lot more than what the people that are creating the data will actually do, right?
Yep.
And how does that then impact the business? What does that mean downstream?
Well, it just means that the insights and decisions that are made from these reports are sound, because the information's been error checked to a higher degree than it ever has been previously.
Okay, garbage in, garbage out, which is the old fundamental.
It was never garbage. It was never
yeah,
garbage.
no, but
it was what was the maybe a few degrees of accuracy can make a big difference.
Well, I suppose if you're dealing with topologies and all that sort of stuff, digging in 6 inches away from where you should be might be a huge risk, right?
It can be, yes.
Alrighty. So, Grace, in terms of the amount of time taken to produce the Word documents, how long is it taking to produce these documents now?
So that first stage where we prepare the data and warehouse it to use in our visualizations takes around an hour to run to update all the data sources. But the actual automation for 50 projects probably takes 10 minutes to run. But the majority of that is downloading the images from the server.
Okay. So we're talking a matter of hours, like minutes rather than days and weeks. Is that a huge saving in terms of time from what used to happen, Phil?
Look, you've got 50 projects. We just use 50 as an example. All right, you've got 50 projects with different degrees of expertise when it comes to finding the information and presenting it. All right, so we took a very conservative estimate, right, with reaching out to project managers, and we determined that a very conservative estimate would be that there are 12 hours of dedicated time at the project level just on those areas that we've automated. All right, so you multiply that up by 50, there's a lot of hours across the business, right, as compared to a streamlined process.
Is that how you do your cost justification, your cost benefit analysis in Lendlease? Do you use people's time savings and?
Absolutely, right. I mean, anyone that's seen me in previous Alteryx presentations, I always harp on about the cost benefit side, right? The reason we've grown the team to the degree that we have is because we start an initiative, we select an initiative based on a cost benefit, right? We always want to drive down the costs of the business. We always want to improve the margin, be able to demonstrate that. And that plays back to how we can fund having data specialists in the team and growing our team, is because we positively affect the bottom line.
Okay, just looking at a couple of questions and a reminder to our viewers out there, if you'd like to ask any questions at all, the Q&A panel is open right the way through this webinar. One of the questions that came up, there's a couple of people that are asking the same question, in fact, is why Word? We're talking about automating reports and we're going to Word. So Phil, what's the background to using Word in such a modern reporting application?
It's about bringing people on a journey. All right, so the Word report has been used for the last 20 years, right? It's well understood by senior project managers who are a bit grey like me, all right? And they're looking to have iterative improvements to their processes. All right, now if it was up to me, we'd go straight to an online system, right? All of that information would be interactive. All of that information would be maybe put out in a story, right, every month, right? Bringing up all the different graphical representations. But we've got to take people on a journey, right? So we're improving their processes, and the long-term plan for this initiative would be to eventually get there, right? But we don't want to have people take a big leap. Right, they've got their projects, they've got their reporting, they've done it this way for a while. We're making significant improvements and they love it, right? But a step at a time.
Okay, so interesting point, because I think culture and the way people use data is changing as well. Are you finding that the new employees, the new generation, are more data literate than the guys that have been around for decades in Lendlease?
There is no doubt that there is a generational proficiency with the new technologies, all right? But it's different skill sets in different areas, right? We expect our project managers to be specialised in 5G telecommunications equipment, right? Not necessarily the reporting best practice visualizations, right? We're expecting our experts to be professional in building bridges, not ETL processes, right? So I don't think that even with that increased proficiency, that we would have an expectation that project managers in the future are going to have that skill set, right? We have 300,000 subcontractors that we use across the business, and each of them has a different skill set. We bring them in for their electrical expertise, their mechanical expertise, right? You know, I think it's a matter of utilising the skill sets, like the data specialists, in that space. Now, will those new project managers have a better understanding of how it's been derived and how to ingest those visualizations and that data? Yes. But I think we're all improving. But it's just, again, a step at a time.
I like that. I've seen some projects where I think people try and give all the new toys, all the new tech and all the data all at once to people that aren't ready to absorb it, and I think that becomes problematic in a transformation or a cultural aspect of being able to transform to use the data effectively. So I think it sounds like you've got a stepwise approach which hopefully is bearing some fruit for you.
And look, that's come about from experience, really, because I've tried to take the big step approach, and you develop these systems, but it's too much of a stretch to take people through that change. Step at a time, get them across it. You know, Grace and I have spent an hour with each of our project managers across 30 odd projects so far, right?
So how have they taken the new systems? What sort of feedback have you got from them since you put the new systems in place?
They like it. I was a little bit nervous originally because we were going to be sort of challenging the status quo. There's a lot of different ways that they've been filling out these reports, and they've been doing it every month for the length of the projects they have. And they have all their own ways of doing these reports. So initially I thought, oh no, then people don't like to change. But they really like the visualizations. They like the fact that it just turns up in their inbox. Some of the comments that they fill out in other spreadsheets end up in that report. They don't have to write them out again. So yeah, it was received really well.
Phil, any feedback from you on the reception in the business of the new systems?
This initiative was really focused at the project managers, right? And like I mentioned, when I joined Lendlease, I was a project manager. So I was there actually writing those reports every month, right? Finding my own information, deciding how I was going to visualize that information back to the business. Having that done for them, right, how could they complain, right? They love it, right? It's then we can have them focused on getting on with what they're experts in.
Yeah, okay.
And that's where the big money is.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so let's get close to wrapping up here, because I think we're close to time here. One of the other questions that's come through on the Q&A, someone's keen to understand where you're going to next. So they say that really appreciate the insight you've shared here, Phil. What's next for you and Lendlease?
Well, if we relate it back to this particular initiative, we're calling this stage one. All right, so of those dozen areas that the business needs to report every month, we've covered off on 3. Okay, so there is that opportunity to now go into the data sources in other areas and provide that additional information. Now, again, it's a stepped process. All right, so we've had an approval to spend $225,217 is what it costs, all right? To save 900 and something thousand, all right, after all of our costs, right? And that's for 1 year, all right? So rather than, on a couple of fronts. One, it's a stepped approach. Two is you're not asking for a fortune to start with. You're just asking for a humble investment. The next step is to go through and say, okay, well, give us another couple of 100,000, we'll save you another $1 million, right? So that will take us through to a fully automated report that the project manager receives, and then they just write insight. This is my insight onto the information that's been provided. Then it's taking it out of the Word system and into a proper interactive reporting system that they can use with all of its underlying information that they can delve into, should need be, in those meetings with management.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is more automation, so you've got more areas to tackle. You're looking always at making a business case to make sure that the management team at Lendlease are seeing a return on their investment. Sounds like about 3 or 4 fourfold type returns, and that there's probably more data than you can deal with, and there's new ways to use it and get people used to making database decisions or data fact-based decisions.
Frankly, there's more opportunity that we can deal with, and so what we look at is, well, personally, I look at, we've got to make at least a 3-time return, right? One is that you, no matter how conservative your estimates, you're going to hit the mark, right? No matter how horribly wrong some of those build processes might go, you've got the buffer, right? And you've really got to target. Well, where are you going to get best bang for buck, right? Because it's easier just to go, oh, so and so wants this, and let's do that. And really, there's not much of an upside to it.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, look, I think it's probably time to wrap this up. Get our teams back to their day job. I'd really like to take the opportunity to thank you, Grace, for your time today, and especially Phil, a really warm thank you on behalf of MIP and the Data School for making time and sharing that insight with us, and answering some of the questions that our viewers had. So thank you both for being with us today.
Pleasure.
Thanks once again to our friends at Alteryx for co-sponsoring this webinar and bringing Phil and Grace to you to share their experience, their insights. We will be looking forward to doing some more testimonials and some more user case studies like this to help you gain insight to getting the best value from your data with Alteryx, MIP and the Data School. Until next time, we'll see you then.